In this video, we're gonna learn how to create activities and how to launch them. I'm gonna also show you how to pass data to an activity. So far, all the apps we have been building has only one activity and it's called main activity. Before we get started, let's start with a question. What's an activity? For the end user, it's just a screen or a UI they can interact with when they open your app. Activities are one of many ways an app could start. Other ways an app could start may include services, broadcast receivers, content providers, app widgets. These are called components, and these serve as entry points, allowing an app to start in different ways. So far, we only know about activities, and that's okay. In this video, we're going to only focus on activities. Some of the things we're going to do in this video might also apply to other components. How our activity is started? Well, initially, our main activity starts when the user clicks on the icon of our app, and subsequent activities defined within our app can be started with start activity function, which we're gonna look at in this video. In any case, it's the Android that takes care of launching the apps. We might need to start learning about Android manifest file and what it is. Every activity that's defined inside of our app must be declared within the Android manifest file. The Android manifest file contains essential information about your app. These informations are needed for Android build tools, the Android operating system, and Google Play. You can declare a lot of things inside of Android manifest file, but more importantly, you would declare all the activities you have defined within your app, like I said, and the permission required by your app to run, such as permission for the notification and storage. Let's take a general overview of this XML file format. Since I am a web developer, I can see some parallel between XML file format and HTML. This XML file format is a lot similar to HTML. This elated word is called an element. Elements have opening tag and a closing tag. Opening and closing tags are used if you want to nest some elements inside another element. If you just want to declare an inline element, you would use opening angle bracket, element name, and then use backward slash and closing angle bracket. These are called attributes and these are called values. Furthermore, Android Manifest expects you to follow certain nesting rules. For example, you may only declare activity elements inside application element, intent filter elements inside activity. Okay, now that we know some things about this format, let's move on. Let's take a closer look at the application element. There are a bunch of attributes listed here. There are attributes for location of the icon and round icon and theme for our app, a target API, and other things. Let's now look at activity element. The activity element has name, exported, label, theme attributes. In the name attribute, you provide the location of the activity. When you use the dot main activity, it automatically assumes the activity is inside of the package name of your application. The label is used as a text at the bottom of the app icon. The theme attribute is the resource location for the style. It doesn't exist within your app though. The intent filters are used to add additional information about our app. These are used to tell the Android what our app is capable of, what purpose our app serves. And there's also a category element. This tells what category our activity belongs. As you can see, they're using the main for the action name of our activity. This tells the Android that this is actually the main entry point of our app. This is the main activity. And the category name launcher says that this activity must be listed within our launcher screen. Within the launcher, this activity uses an icon and a label to display as. Okay, let's take a closer look at how our main activity is created. Our main activity extends the component activity class, and it has lifecycle methods such as onCreate, and we are calling the onCreate method on the superclass, and we are also passing saved instance bundle. At this point we don't know what this is, and we are also calling the enable edge-to-edge function. And inside of the onCreate function we have a set content. We're using the intent theme, and we're passing the composable. This is how you create an activity. Let's just copy this as a sort of template and change the activity name. I'm going to create the activity alongside main activity file. Click on new and select the Kotlin file, class. For the class name, I'm going to call it second activity. Alright, so I'm just gonna delete the name of the class and put in second activity. Now we have a second activity. Inside of the scaffold I have a button that says test. So instead I'm gonna call it the second activity, just so we can see that this is actually second activity when we launch it. We might want to call this main activity too, just so it makes sense. Okay, we can see our main activities. How the hell are we supposed to launch the second activity? Well, for that we use start activity function passing the intent object. But before we do that, we actually need to declare this activity inside the Android manifest file. Okay, so let's go to the Android manifest file and declare it. So every activity can be declared using the activity element inside the application element. I'm going to create an activity element. Okay. At most every activity defined must have a name. I'm gonna use the this syntax that automatically adds the package name of our app. Okay, this essentially declares the activity. Now to start the activity, I'm going to create a button that will launch the activity, that will launch a function that we're going to create. I'm going to call this function open second activity. To launch an activity, like I said, we need a start activity and intent object. Well, intent, we can create intent objects using intent constructor. This constructor has many overloads. We're going to take a quick look at the overload it has. We can create an intent object by calling intent. Intent is a class and it has many constructor overloads. I have created a list of all the possible constructor overload this intent class has. So if you don't use any argument for the intent invocation, it just creates an empty intent. If you pass in a string for the action parameter, you get an intent with a specified action. We don't know what action is at this point. You can also create an intent with an action and a URI. And then you can create an intent by passing context and a reference to a class. Finally, you can create an intent with action and a URI, context, and a reference to a class. I'm going to create an intent by passing context and a reference to a class. Usually these classes are instances of activities or any component within your app. Okay, let's create an intent object by calling intent. We need to pass in a context and a reference to an activity class. You can get the context inside of the main activity by using this keyword. Also inside of the composables, you can get the context by calling local context.current. So I'm gonna get the context inside of the composables. I'm gonna call it context. I'm gonna get it from local context.current. So I'm gonna pass the context, we got it, to this open activity function. Let's run the open activity as soon as the user clicks on this button. Let's make our function accepts a context. We're going to pass the context. Now we have the context and we can just use the context inside of the intent constructor. Now we need to reference the activity we want to launch. The activity we want to launch is second activity. Just like we can reference a function by using double colons in front of it, we can reference the classes by using this syntax I'm about to show you. Okay. This created an intent object. We just need to pass this to start activity function. You can get the start activity by two ways. You can every context has a start activity method. But if you just use the start activity function, outside of the main activity, you need to pass in 4 parameters: context, intent, options. Okay, I meant 3 parameters. I'm gonna use the start activity inside of the context. This just accepts intent. Let's see what happens when we press the button. Okay. We got main activity. We might want to wrap this in a column. Alright, let's click on the launch second activity button. Okay, we are now seeing the second activity. We just launched the second activity. Let's take a closer look at what happens when you launch an activity by passing in an intent object. Intent objects contain all the details necessary to find an activity. In the intent objects I created, I provided the context and a reference to the activity I want Android to create and subsequently launch. Usually when Android receives an intent to start an activity, it tries to find activities that are capable of receiving that intent. Android does this by looking at the intent filters of each activities. If an activity is capable of receiving that intent, Android starts that activity. You can bypass this process by explicitly providing the reference to the activity you want Android to start. That's what we did when we created the intent object. This approach is recommended if all you wanted to do is launch activities within your own app. Is this the only way to launch an activities? Well, no. There is another way you can launch an activity. Instead of providing the reference to an activity you want to launch, you can create an intent object by passing in the requirements of an activity. For example, you might be looking for an activity that is capable of doing certain tasks that belong to certain categories, as well as it's capable of receiving certain data. When you create an object, by passing in all this information, you are creating what is known as implicit intent. As opposed to explicit intent, there might be more activities that are capable of receiving these intents. Anyway, you can list all the capabilities of your activities in the intent filters within your activity element inside the Android manifest file. As you can tell, our activity doesn't exactly have the intent filters declared within the Android manifest file, so our activity isn't capable of receiving implicit intent. Let's go and start declaring the intent filters for activity. You can declare intent filters inside of the activity element. Inside of the intent filter element, you can declare three elements: action, category, data. If you want your activity to receive implicit intent, you must have action and category declared. Let's try creating an action element. In the name attribute of the action element, you want to provide what your activity is capable of doing. Here you can see the main activity is using the main action name. As you can see, it's using main action name. It tells the Android that this is actually the main entry point of our application. This is a standardized name for the activities you can use for the action. You can see all the standardized names you can use for your activities by entering Android intent action. These are all the standard standard actions an activity can perform. You would use, for example, you would use the call action if your activity is capable of calling or something. And yeah, you can see there's an activities for view. You would use this action if your activity is capable of viewing. Additionally, you can just provide any string. So I'm gonna use custom for this because our activity isn't capable of performing any standardized actions. You can create an category element. Inside of the name attribute of this category element, you can use the standardized categories. For example, this is all the standardized categories your activity can belong. I'm going to provide a link to the intent docs where you can see all the information of all these, what these categories mean. So if you don't know what your category belongs to, if your category, if your activity doesn't belong in any of the categories, you can create your own custom categories or use default category. I'm going to use the default categories. When you create an implicit intent, if you don't provide the category for the intent, it automatically adds the default category for you. If we hover over this red squiggly line, we can see there is some um, information. As of Android 12, Android exported must be set. So this, what does this Android exported attribute do? Well, if you set the exported true, other activities can start your activities. If you set this false, other activities can't start your activity. So I'm gonna set this to true. Additionally, you can set to the data element. Here's the data element. These are all the attributes these data elements can accept. These attributes are parts of an URI. This is a URI of a website. I have identified all the parts of this URI. Also, you would encounter URI, for example, with a content scheme or file scheme. You can then use these parts as attributes and pass in the actual parts your URI is using. Okay, let's now look at what values you can use for the meme type attribute. Meme types are used to denote what your file types are. For example, if you have an image file and its extension is JPG, you would use the meme type image slash JPEG. If you have an image with PNG extension, you would use the image slash PNG meme type. If you wanted to cover all the image file extensions, you would use the wildcard symbol. To use that, you use image slash star symbol. This represents all type of image formats. I'm not going to cover all the meme types used. Instead, if you are looking for a meme type of a specific file, you're better off searching it on the internet. This is how you might go about creating an data element. So if your activity is capable of receiving data as a URI, you would probably use the data element. I'm gonna leave out this data element for my activity because my activity doesn't accept any data. I'm not gonna use the data element because our activity doesn't use any data. If your activity could accept the data, you would probably use the data element and set all the URI parts, and then you would also set the meme type. Now that we have set the intent filters, we can now start our activity using implicit intent. Now we can use the intent overload where it accepts an action. For that action, we can use the action, whatever the action name of the activity we used in the manifest file. I'm using the custom string, so as action name, I'm just gonna type it. As you can see, I'm also using the category default. But if you call the intent without passing any category, it automatically adds the default category. So you can either add it or don't, because it automatically adds it. Let's see what happens if we click on the launch second activity button. We get a pop-up with two apps, test intent and intent waiting. This app also uses the same action name as the second activity. So when you start an activity like this, you would get all the activities that are able to receive this intent. So I'm gonna choose the intent waiting, our app, and there we go. We can see our activity. There are additional properties and method intent objects provides us. We're gonna look at that now. You can use the add category method of intent object to add a category of activities you are looking for. For example, if you wanted to add a default category, you use intent dot category default. You'll get a list of all the category constants. For the data property, you can pass a URI. Currently we don't have any URI, so we can't really pass it, so I'm gonna skip it. You can use the type property to set the meme type of the file. For example, you can use this star symbol / star. This denotes all the files. So if you wanted to find an activity that accepts all the image files, you would use image. Or if you are looking for an activity that only accepts JPEG, you would use this. These are the most common properties and methods you would use on the intent object. There are a lot of properties and methods intent as. You can check it what other properties it has by looking at their documentation. We know that we can pass in URI as data to intent objects. What about passing in Kotlin data types? How are we going to pass Kotlin data types? For example, strings and integers. For that, intent as a put extra method. Put extra accepts two parameters, name and a value. As you can see, name is just a string and values can be a boolean, byte, all these values. We got also integer and array. Parseable, I don't know what that is. For the name, you can use any custom name you want, or you can use the predefined constants. You get all the predefined constants by using intent class. For example, I can use extra text, or I could just call it something. So I'm just gonna pass a string. So when you use the put extra method, you are passing additional data to the activity. You can receive those data inside of the onCreate function by using intent. If you want to get the string, you use getStringExtra method, and you use the key passed when you created that data. For example, I'm using the person, so I need to use that. I'm gonna use toast to see the message instead of logging. I can use the make text method of toast, and it accepts context, text, and duration. I can just use this as a context, and for the text I'm going to use a result toast. For the duration I'm going to use length long. To actually show this toast I'm going to use show method. So let's try launching the activity. Okay, it's because the custom our activity does not have the image JPEG or whatever meme type. So as you can see, if the Android doesn't find the activity, it crashes. So we need to handle those crashes. So if we go to the log, you'd see some, okay, this is the name of the crash, activity not found error exception. So we need to handle this exception. We can handle exceptions by using try catch block. I'm gonna put all our code in the try block, and we're gonna handle any exception thrown by this block of code using the catch. All the exception thrown will be passed as a parameter to the first parameter of catch. I'm trying to handle the what's the exception? Okay, so I'm trying to handle the activity not found exception. So I'm going to use that activity. So when the app crashes, I'm gonna create a toast. I'm gonna pass the context and the message, which is no apps found. I'm gonna use a length long for the duration, and we're gonna show it. Let's make our app crash one more time. I'm gonna use the gibberish for the action. It should make our app crash. As you can see, no apps found. Our app didn't crash, and we got a toast. Okay, we were trying to pass in the data, so let's go back doing that. We have custom and category set to default, and we have put some Kotlin data types. Everything seems good. Okay, this is the app just once. Okay, as you can see, the toast logged the message, the data we sent. We can then, if we wanted to, we can then use somewhere in our Jetpack Compose elements to display it, to use this data. So we have been launching an activity defined within our app. What if I told you the activity we define within our app can be launchable by other apps? Well, to do that, we just need to modify a tiny bit in the Android manifest file. So to make our app launchable by other apps, we need obviously we need input filters, and we need to set the exported to true. Also, we need to make sure the our category is either uses the default or something else. We need to have this. We can have more categories. So if we add more than one category, or else it can't find this activity. Let's try launching this activity from another app. I'm gonna go ahead and quickly create another app. I want to call this Moon. Let's quickly create a button that starts an activity. Maybe inside of here. Get rid of this text. In the onClick parameter of this button, we need to start the activity. I need to create an implicit intent. I'm going to use the action that I created in the other app, which is custom. I don't need to provide the category. We can get the we can get the start activity by using context. But I'm going to use the start activity method that you can use anywhere. This accepts 3 parameters: context, intents, and options. In the options parameter, you usually provide how the activity is supposed to animate when it opens. We can set it to null if we don't want to provide any options. Either way, we need to get the context. So let's pass in the context. For the intent, pass the intent. For the option, pass null. Okay, let's try running this app. So if we press the button launch, it should launch the activity we created in the other app. So this is the app we want to launch the activity from. So our app was crashing because for whatever reason, if you don't provide the extra data, it causes the app to crash. So this second activity now accepts this. The second activity accepts the data with a person as a key. Since if we don't provide it, it makes the app crash. We probably want to make it some sort of null. So nullable type, I made this nullable type, so it should technically work. It's still crashing. Okay, I looked at the logs of the app. It's because of a runtime exception. It has this illegal state exception. You must either set a text or a view. This is because we're using the toast make text, and we need to provide a string or a text for this. So we can't use this if we don't if we can't use the null. So let's only run the toast if the result is not null. Okay, let's try launching the Moon app and try launching the second activity from there once again. Okay, now you can see this app launched the second activity. I showed you how to launch activities we created in other apps. Let's try launching activities. Let's try launching activities of apps that are installed in our device. I'm gonna try launching apps that are capable of performing standard actions. For example, I'm gonna launch apps that are capable of sending. Let's try running this and launching. Let's see what happens. Okay, we get a pop-up saying no apps found, because all the apps that are capable of sending also has a meme type set. So we need to use the meme type. We need to provide all the additional information, all these activities except, or else the Android can't find all these activities. I'm going to set the meme type to accept all type of files. I can do that by using this format. Okay, now we get a list of all the apps that are able to do this, that are able to send. We got Gmail, Chrome, Google Messages, all this. Let's try finding apps that are able to view. We get all these apps that are that can view something. As you can see, we can easily find activities that have implemented the standard actions. So if you know an activity that uses some custom action, you can use that to launch that activity. Let's try passing in some data to these activities. In order to pass data to activities, we need to know what type of what data types they accept and what keys they use. So normally we don't know that because we don't really know the source code of that. So there's no way we know what keys they use. Instead, we might want to look into the documentation of the app or forums where they discuss keys the activities they're using. Or if it's an open source app, we can look into the source code and see what keys they are using. If it's a very popular app like Gmail, we already know what keys they use for the data. Gmail uses extra subject for the subject and extra text for the actual text. So we need to find the extra. So it's using the standard keys. I'm gonna say this is a subject. For the body, I'm going to say this is the body. Okay, actually the Gmail is implements the send action, not view. Okay, let's find the Gmail, and when we click on it, as you can see, this said this is a subject for, oh my bad, it's extra text. If there's already an instance of Gmail app, we need to close it. Okay, as you can see, we pass some data to the Gmail app. Anyway, that's it for this video. We learned a lot of things in this video. We learned how to create activities. We learned how to declare them in manifest file. We actually tried launching them in different ways. We also tried passing data to them. But in the next video, we're gonna learn how to receive data from activity. Until then, see ya.